bit tricky with this one because you could really put pretty much any of these games on the list. It's Mario Kart, and each one basically has been one of the games of its generation, but each one has somehow improved pretty much from the last one. So technically that means each game's got better than the last one. So if like the first one's one of the best games on the Super Nintendo, then there's some kind of compound of greatness there that doesn't work, but it doesn't matter. For years got kind of unfairly probably maligned because of the kind of iterativeness. Same game over and over again. People kept saying, oh, it's another Mario Kart, which is, broadly speaking, essentially true. It's Mario in a kart going around tracks with his pals. But that doesn't stop like each game just being really good, from the SNES through to the one we got here, which is Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Which, this is probably the one that's like the Deluxe, and the title gives it away. It is just a remake of the one up on the Wii U, so it was a bit cheeky that re-release, a full price re-release, from Nintendo. But you can kind of forgive them when the game's this good. You know what I mean? It's just a brilliant game, and multiplayer wise, it's stunning. The big group here, was it 12 people on a race, and then being hit on the last corner by 3 red shells as somebody else flies around the corner. It's special in a way that most of the games aren't. So big props to Mario Kart 8. It's a cracking game, and sometimes the different versions don't necessarily make that big a difference, but it's only really Mario Kart 8 and Mario Kart Deluxe it can really tar with that brush. But that doesn't stop it being one of the best games ever made. I had an Xbox, we previously discussed, but I didn't really kind of get too far into it. I didn't really get deep into it. It just kind of quickly became a box in the corner of the room. But one game that really kind of captured that machine for me was SpiderMan 2. SpiderMan 2, the movie 2. SpiderMan, the movie. The one based on the Dr. Octopus film. The titles are a bit weird. But again, this was one of those games where it kind of took a previous kind of genre but idea for a game and GTA'd it, basically. You'd had like these Spider-Man games out on the PlayStation that were pretty good. They were still kind of essentially point-to-point platforming games. I kind of remember like you were on the rooftops, but like the city was like a fog underneath you, so you couldn't go down even though you were Spider-Man. But here you had New York. You could web swing around New York, and it was brilliant. It was amazing. There's a reason why it's still talked about, to this day, and why it took, I don't know how long it took to make it better, but the recent PS4 Spider-Man was stunning, mainly because it kind of was one of the first games since this one to capture the swinging sensation idea of just catapulting yourself around New York based on your momentum. And why they couldn't just iterate on that model afterwards, I don't know. But none of the Spider-Man games after this, Spider-Man 2, kind of really captured that. They were alright. But this was something special. The missions probably not, because they had a kind of bad tendency to go, here's a boss, we'll put you in a room, which wasn't great. And capturing balloons and fighting bad guys on the street wasn't particularly interesting. But just being able to go around that city, just swing around it was, it was good. It was real good. I loved my Neo Geo Pocket Color. It really is one of the best of the handheld machines. The little clicky joystick was brilliant, the design of it was brilliant, and some cracking games for it. Some good fighting games for the machine, but this isn't a fighting game, this is a card game. This is SNK vs. SNK vs. Capcom Card Fights Clash, which was a trading card game. Cheekily done Pokemon style in that you had like an SNK version and the Capcom version, so you had like 2 versions of the game, each kind of more focused on the different fighting games. So you'd have one with more SNK characters, one with more Capcom characters. I think I had the Capcom one, but it's pretty straightforward. Card battle game. You kind of put your cards down and you attack your opponents, and they can block with their own cards. The idea being to hit your opponents and get their health down to 0. It was kind of overwhelming them with your card attacks and your hand things. So yeah, I mean, it was, you know, basically kind of Pokemon. You wander around this kind of pretty decently realized game world, meeting people, battling them, getting cards, battling gym leaders. I mean, not gym leaders, it was completely legally distinct from that. Whatever they were other people to win some kind of giant competition. I forget now, I really do. But the point was, the actual mechanics of the game was cracking. The card fight, the trade-in was great, you know, building your deck, taking it to battle and all that. Probably still like my favourite cards battling game. Yeah, I mean, you know, probably like Slay the Spire, I suppose, is the reason why it might be better than this, but it hasn't got Metal Mecha Zangief in it, has it? You know what I mean? It can be good as you like, but unless you've got a robot, you know, rushing dude, you can hit you here with a spinning pile driver. What's the point? You may as well just, you know, cancel the game. Lights into Dreams was, I mean, it's a weird game anyway, but the fact that it even got released is weird. It's the game that Saturn didn't know it needed. How can I put this? It's the game that we didn't know we wanted, but it wasn't what the machine needed. What basically trying to say is Saturn needed a Sonic game. That's what it really needed. It needed a Sonic game to kind of draw an audience in, because it struggled something chronic, you know, pretty quick, and it needed a big name game to kind of draw people in. Yeah, it had all the virtual games, you know, Daytona USA, Virtual Kart, Virtual Fighter, all this sort of things, but it probably needed a Sonic game to kind of really cement itself. But it didn't get the Sonic game. It got Nights into Dreams, which was some kind of like crazy game with you flying around a dreamscape as some kind of jester looking fella going through rings. Weird. But it used the 3D pad, which was good, and it was just, you know, a pure score attack game. That's what it was at its core. It was, you know, go around these courses, best possible time, get the best possible score to win the dreams. I can't remember, but it was really good, and it was a cracking game. But it just wasn't what the machine needed. It needed something more mainstream, something more, you know, popular to bring the crowds in to sustain the console. But this, you know, cracking as it is, just didn't do that. It just played to the you know, the crowd that was already there, which wasn't what the machine needed, which was a shame. We got a cracking game, but we lost the console, so, you know, make it out what you will. Burnout was a cracking series of racing games. Burnout 1, 2 and 3, and then Burnout Paradise, which is the one I'm picking here. There's arguments for some of the early ones, the kind of more not basic, but the more kind of by the book, pick a stage, race it, do that kind of stuff. You know, there's arguments for that being a kind of better framework for a racing game, but having the open city just kind of bosh around was and is brilliant. Because this was PS3 time, I think. So the kind of big, massive city, just, you know, just park up some lights, start a race, crack off down the track, you know, smash some cars in, win that. Then you find out you're at a road. It's like, oh, wait a second, pal's got a best time down this road. I'm going to beat that. Go off and beat it. It was, you know, it was probably a bit ahead of its time. Maybe the open world thing was a bit crowbarred on, but the feel of the game was still brilliant. The boosting, the physicality of the cars, the weight of the cars always felt great. You know, when you slammed the car off the road, it really felt good. It really felt properly good. So, yeah, I think I've got a big soft spot for that kind of just the ambition of the Burnout Paradise. I mean, yeah, take out the stunt modes from the early modes. That maybe like one of those, like Burnout 3 Takedown. You could probably, a different day would have been here, but I just love the city of it. I just love the freedom of it, just boshing around, listening to music. It's an absolute treat, and yeah, well, we're kind of going back to now. It's on PS4, maybe not the Switch. I don't know how good the version is, but definitely the PS4. The city looks great, and all the cars look great. So yeah, big fan of Burnout as a series. And Paradise is probably my favourite. Yeah, it is definitely. Yeah, totes. Yeah, it really is. That seems like a bit of a weird choice to think, oh, you know what, it's 1994, let's put Donkey Kong on the Game Boy. Because I think this predates Donkey Kong Country. They may have been done at the same time, but I think it's before that period when Donkey Kong came back to become like a big Disney character, Jesus Christ, a big Nintendo character. Because here we still got, the kind of original kind of look, more in step with the original arcade machine before Rare kind of redesigned him for Donkey Kong Country, which I kind of prefer that look to the Super one. But anyway, so yeah, what we get here is basically what starts off being a remake of the original Donkey Kong series with Mario rescuing his lady friend from Donkey Kong, and then boom, before you know it, he runs off and you're in the city. I think it's New Donk City for Mario Odyssey, if I remember right. But the point is, it opens up into more platformy games, more platformy levels and different kind of themes like cities and jungles. And then it becomes a puzzle game. It becomes, how do I throw Mario around this level to get to the key to get to the door as quickly as possible? And it's really helped by the extra controls that Mario is given. Before this, Mario was basically, run around, jump, speed up, jump a bit faster and longer. It wasn't until like Mario 64 that would open up a lot of the controls. The kind of 3D environment would open up the controls a lot more. But this game kind of gets there beforehand. You've got Mario can do backflips. You can do like handstands, hand springs into jumps. You can do multiple jumps that kind of get powered up as he goes through them. It was really insane to have this kind of expanded control option, but especially with it being done on the Game Boy. Like, it wasn't even on the Super Nintendo. It was the Game Boy with 2 buttons that got it, and all those, that opening up of the controls just gave so much more, such a wider vein of moves you could do. So you could handspring off this platform, spring off to this platform, land on this cable and spin round and land at the top, backflip onto this other platform, just down stuff that just required split-second timing. Probably the game got a little bit too tricky and being reliant on that split-second timing. But it made it so much more fun. Just the options available to you with Mario. These levels will probably be like, a couple of screens tall, maybe a couple of screens wide. But the options to go through it were really opened up, but you weren't just kind of thinking, oh, how do I jump from here to here? It's like, no, I can backflip off there, go off that dude, get that handbag. I mean, ignore that kind of side of things, it's a bit daft. Get the handbag, get the extra life, boom, done level. And it was cracking for, what's ostensibly a remake of a 1980s arcade machine, and what hews to it quite closely. Got some platforms to where the monkey is and beat him. It's a cracking game and one of the secret best Game Boy games. I can't remember if it's the highest one on this list, which would make it the highest and best Game Boy game. Maybe it is. I can't remember. I'll have to clarify that at some point. But this one, yeah, Donkey Kong for the Game Boy, Donkey Kong 94, whatever it's referred to, is a corker and is still well worth your time. Now, the first CD that I ever got, this will make sense in a minute, trust me. The first CD I ever got as a child, was I probably 11 or 12, something like that, was the soundtrack to Street Fighter 2 that came on the front cover of the Nintendo magazine system. We didn't have a CD player, it was still early, not everybody had one at that point, but my uncle had one, so I think we were around there for like a Christmas party. It must have been Christmas party. Yeah, call it Christmas party. I remember just taking the CD with me and kind of going up to him going, can I play this on your CD player, please? Can I play this? And plonking it into the CD drive and put some headphones in and listen to the music. And I'm not sure if I'd even actually play the game at that point. It was, coming out for Sense was a big deal, and it was a big deal in the arcades. But I live in Gloucester, and it's not exactly an arcade city. You get like the fair that comes around every July, and then you'd have arcade machines on there and that sort of thing. But I really honestly can't say if I would play Street Fighter at that point. So just the music that I had, the dun 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 dun, the opening credit music, going through all the different character stages and that sort of thing, and that was enough to hook me into being a Street Fighter 2 fan. And then that's before you would actually play the damn thing, which was and is a fantastic game, fantastically well made, balanced. Whether it's the arcade version, whether it's a SNES version, whatever you want, it's one of the peak fighting games, even to this day. It's been superseded, and it will be superseded on this list. But you can still pick up this game. How old is it now? 20 odd years, 30 years old, and it still works. It still hangs together. It still plays well. You can still find depth in it to learn and master, which makes it a brilliant game. Even to a small boy who could only listen to the music at his uncle's house, I still knew it was something special, and it still is something special to this day. Street Fighter 2 is a legend. So we're talking Street Fighter. The conversation about what is the best game with the word street in the title narrows down pretty quickly. It comes down to Street Fighter 2 or Streets of Rage. Specifically Streets of Rage 2, which I never had for the Mega Drive. I never actually owned it, even though I had a Mega Drive around this time. I never had it. I think my cousin had it, or we rented it out, because that's where I remember playing it, is at my nan's on my cousin's Mega Drive, just kind of blasting through it as quickly as we could. I don't know if I did complete it or not. I can't remember. I don't think we did. Can't remember how far we got into it. But it was always one of the games, like when I picked up like either an emulator or game collection, I'd always go back and the first game I put through was Street Rage 2, because it was just, I could just play it. You could just remember how to play it so easily. It's one of the kind of great skills of the scroll and beat 'em ups is they're just so easy to pick up and play. They've got depth to them and skills to master, but just picking them up is like, that's jump, that's punch, here's some dudes, end them as painfully as possible. Street Rage 2 I would go back to several times. I don't think I picked it up on like Virtual Console, but I remember picking up the 3DS, the 3D Classics version. Was actually one of the best versions. You just need to, like, not the full-on 3D, but just kind of flick it on us a little bit, or just kind of give the different planes of the game like a little bit of depth, which would really help out, kind of measuring out spacing your characters and that sort of thing. That was a good version. The one on the Switch and the latest Mega Drive one, that's good as well. And pretty much any emulator, it's cracking. And I got back into it, and I think this game earlier in the year I finally did in one credit. I did the whole thing as max through in one credit, which was a lovely thing. And playing through it, I just kind of realised how good this game is. How much fun it is, how much joy there is to having kind of learning the levels and spacing that out, and realising how to control the crowd, how to control your own emotions playing it, so you don't kind of get yourself too swamped. It's brilliant from beginning to end. I suppose on the high difficulties it does get a bit unfair, but it is you can do it. That's the thing, you can learn the game to get through it on the high levels. Whilst it is tough, a large extent of it is down to you. If you make the mistake, the game doesn't necessarily always punish you for doing the wrong thing. You made a mistake, and therefore that's where you get punched in the chops by that guy over there. So Street Rage 2 is a cracking game. One of the absolute best of the kind of scroll and beat 'em ups. One of the best Mega Drive games. Even though the fact I never actually owned the original cartridge, it was ends up becoming one of my favourite games. So who'd have thunk that, eh? So that's life for you. Remember what I said? Street Fighter 2 will be great, but it'll be superseded. Yeah, here's one. Street Fighter Alpha 2. This one I had for the Sega Saturn, because whilst the Sega Saturn wasn't exactly the best console in the world, it was pretty much the best fighting game. Best console fighting game. Let's just say that instead. That's much easier. You had you had original Street Fighter Alpha. You had Marvel Superheroes. You had some of the Neo Geo stuff on there. It was a brilliant console for 2D beat 'em ups. Street Fighter Alpha 2 being probably my favourite of those. Not quite as kind of probably bloated as Street Fighter Alpha 3. That just kind of got a bit too much. But this was like A good increase of the characters from the first game. Interesting new characters coming in there. You know, they're opening up the mechanics to the more super moves. Did this one have the? Yeah, this one had the kind of custom combos. You can kind of just like start super move and just bash it to do stuff. It really felt like kind of proper evolution of the series. I can't remember if this. I'm assuming this was before Street Fighter 3. Trying to place in my head. Yeah, I think it was before Street Fighter 3. So this kind of really felt like they'd moved it on, even though we had all the iterations of Street Fighter 2, 2 Turbo, Championship Edition, Super Street Fighter 2, etc., etc. They kind of iterated on that initial version. This, the Alpha series really felt like, no, we're going to move on. This is kind of, where the future of the series is going. So, yeah, thoroughly enjoyed it on the Saturn. Don't think I ever played it in the arcades, but the version on Saturn was probably good enough to that not to be that much of an issue. It's still a cracking version of a fantastic game. That's just two dudes fighting in the street, but ends up being one of the best games ever made. Daytona USA. Daytona USA. But this is obviously not the Saturn version because it just couldn't hold a candle to the arcade. There's a great video on the Digital Foundry channel about Daytona USA where it goes through just how advanced that arcade machine was. That it was doing stuff with graphics that it would take, 2 generations of consoles later to be able to replicate. That 60 frames per second high-res 3D graphics at that speed, at that pace, was just stunning. And when you walked into an arcade and you had like the 6 big cabinets all lined up on there with the big screens and Daytona blaring out of the speakers, it's like a pure arcade experience. Undoubtedly one of the best Sega arcade games. Probably their last great arcade game. They'd be kind of doing arcade games after this, but were any of them quite as good as this? Were they ever quite as kind of generation defining as this game? Probably not. I think it kind of bookends. One end you got Outrun USA, and then this end you got Daytona. Between that you've got classic after classic. And after Daytona, I think that's when it's the same year or around the same time when the PlayStation 1 comes out. And that's effectively the start of the death knell of arcades. That's when, after that is when, video games shifts towards the home. It shifts away from the arcade as being the center of, innovation and the high watermark, the high level of quality of video games was always the arcade. But now it kind of becomes, no, it's the home. That's where the real work is being done now. And Daytona's like the last kind of big arcade game, the real last big inspirational genre-defining arcade machine. And like I say, there'll be games after this. Like I think Sega Rally would follow, Sega Rally 2, Outrun 2, all these other kind of classic games, but none of them would have the impact I think as Daytona USA had on a generation of players both in the home and in the arcade. By the time of Outrun 2, yeah, it's a cracking game, but it's a niche arcade machine. The version on the Xbox is it's a niche video game experience. It's not like the all-conquering machine-defining games that they used to be, which is a tragedy. There always is a tragedy when those kind of things happen. But Daytona machines were still knocking around 10 years after they were in first out, because that's how long that game could last, based on those those graphics, that cabinet, that feel of play was just was stunning. And yeah, it's probably still very much an arcade experience. I think there's a version on the PS3 that's pretty good, that kind of probably gets to being as close to the arcade as you can, but it's not sitting in that cabinet. It's not being in front of that screen, seeing that blue sky, the same blue sky from Outrun, kind of being thrown at you. A brilliant game, a fantastic game, and probably the last true big hurrah of the arcade before it kind of slowly withered on the vine to where it is now.